Hello, this is Lisa Russick with the podcast We Are All Psychic, and today we have a really great, funny guest, and his name is Patrick. And Patrick, hey, if you're watching, we got a video on Spotify and YouTube. And Patrick, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everybody.
Ooh, that voice. You might recognize that voice if you're not watching. And Patrick, I have a question for you right away. Do you think we're all psychic?
I can't just give you an answer. I'm sure a lot of people do this to you. Oh, yeah. I think that everybody has a bit of, I would use maybe intuition. You know, everybody has
a lot of people
some
say
abilities
over everything else. They like
that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that you can improve upon certain skills. Do I think that we're all, James Van Prague? No. That's my answer. Is that a good answer?
We're not all James Van Prague.
Yes.
Beautiful. That can be your answer. Yes.
Or name the big popular psychic. We're not all, that kind of psychic medium. But
so you do think there's like a skill level you can be born with that's kind of like we talked about this recently on another podcast. Like it's like levels kind of psychic. Mm-hmm. She said she was uncomfortable with the term psychic and she liked intuition better, I think is what she said.
Yeah.
Because she felt like the psychic, it denoted a higher level or like you've worked on it more or something, and I never really thought about it that way. But that's a funny answer. I like the answer.
Well, yeah. And the reason why I feel comfortable saying that is because, I'm sure we'll talk more about this later, but when I really started getting into this stuff, what I've always called my paranormal or my spiritual shift, I could not stop reading about paranormal spiritual topics. And right off the bat, from the very beginning, after having no background in any of this stuff, I started reading topics like astral travel and channeling. Oh, I was learning how to channel and reading all up about it and everything, and dreams. And because I was consuming myself with it and did nothing but think about it and read about it, oh my gosh, that time period in my life, I was having wacky dreams and, weird, astral kind of travel. And I did have some more paranormal experiences, at that time.
Yes,
and so
I do. You start noticing.
Now it was I got worn out and I got tired and I got burned out, and, you realize later, that's not ever going to be me. I'm not going to hang a shingle and, be a channeler or whatever. But I do, I recognize that when you practice something and really dip your feet in and work on it, that things can happen. It just doesn't come naturally.
I don't think what didn't for me. I had imaginary friends and everything I owned had a personality, and I saw pictures in trees and they talked to me. But I thought, it's all imagination. I was fine with that. I didn't care if it was real or not at that age, it was really little. But I wasn't like, one of those children who was like, I see dead people. I was not, I didn't see spirits. I do communicate with spirits now, but I had to work on it. It happened organically. I didn't try to work on it, but then I worked on it once I realized I had the skill. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of just happens sometimes when you do have the skill. And it just kind of woke up when my cousin died. And I was 17 and he was 21, and his spirit came to me right before we got the phone call that he had died. And that was the first time I had any kind of real spiritual anything other than what I already knew. Like a lot of people I think are doing it's their psychic thing and they don't know it, they're just not aware of what they do that's psychic or intuitive, right? That more than other things like empathy. It seems like everybody can feel the other people's emotions. It explains so much about a lot of stuff, So how did you get to that really detailed answer? It's a really detailed answer.
Well, I guess
one we've had.
I guess I've thought about it, in my podcast, I spend more time asking questions than, knowing the answers to things. Does
anyone know the answers to any of this stuff?
Right.
Well,
just in general, having a curiosity, I spend a lot of time doing that. And, when I grew up, I didn't have a lot of paranormal experiences. I wasn't super interested in the paranormal.
Right.
And I didn't grow up in a haunted house, and I
Yeah.
didn't, well, and, for the most part, I also didn't experience a lot of loss at that time. My family has always been kind of a young family.
Right.
Even my larger family has always been kind of young. So for most of my growing up years, I didn't really lose a lot of loved ones.
Right.
So there wasn't as many opportunities there, I think, to connect with at least loved ones that you were familiar with that have crossed
That makes
over,
sense. Yeah. That makes
you
perfect.
know?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, when I was interested in it, I was, approaching 30 when I just, so there was a lot to catch up on,
Me
you know?
too. I was right
Yeah.
around 28, 29 when I was like, okay, this is both for me. I had psychosis with it. Like I
Mhm.
had psychosis. So once I took medication for psychosis or bipolar mania, one or the other, I would just hallucinate a lot. But once I took medication that worked, it split them. And then I was like,
Mm.
oh wow, wow. I could tell like, what was real or what was a psychic experience and what was me going off the rails, thinking about what I'm picking up and trying to
Interesting.
figure it out. Yeah. 'Cause I couldn't really figure out what was going on around me most of the time in my life when I was younger. Now I don't take a medication for that, an antipsychotic or anything. I do take a mood stabilizer and ADD medication because but I have a condition, a genetic condition that causes all this stuff. But like I never did when I was younger ever feel like I was psychic, but I wanted to be really bad. I love Sylvia Browne's books. I would just pour them. Did you read her books?
I have read so many of her books, and I do think, especially after I'd already read quite a few, the more you learn about Sylvia Browne and some of her big misses,
She's had
and
some big ones, yeah.
she's
But
had
she's
some
so
big
confident when
ones.
she gives them, and one of them
Oh
was
yeah,
brutal. Yeah, it was.
but even if she's completely wrong about everything, there is something about her books that
Oh,
I
I
just
know.
love. And my favorite one is my favorite one is just where she explains the afterlife. There's like one where she explains the different buildings and the different structures and the
I didn't read that
process.
one.
And
Interesting.
oh my gosh, I will never forget the descriptions of the hall of records and the what happens when you first get over there and you have to sit down and have your debriefing, or I forget whatever she called it. But oh
Yeah,
my gosh, and those were some of the first books that I read too, and so that explains
really.
why I was so fascinated with it. But even if I roll my eyes at them, Lisa, I love a good book by a psychic medium. Because
Mhm.
after I've interviewed so many psychic mediums or been friends with psychic mediums, you start like, one medium might say, "Oh no, it happens this way," or "Oh no, this is how it is," and
Definitely, they
"Oh
do.
no,
Yeah.
that's a ghost," and "That's not," and I'm like, all those answers can't be true, So I'm like,
A lot of
that
people are
bugs
pretty
me.
sure their way's right,
Right,
accurate too. It's so this
right.
podcast, we can just compare notes here. We both have
Mhm.
interviewed so many intuitive people you have since 2014, you said?
2014. Yep,
Listen
is
to
when the
that go.
podcast
This is a big
started.
seance podcast person. If you do not know Patrick Keller, that's who this is. You should know. You should know. 2014. He's on his
Well,
face.
and
His
before
face is
that,
on there.
in 2012, it started as a blog. So the big seance started as a blog 2 years before, because I needed a place to express the feelings and the questions that I had
Right.
when I first started this big shift. I was learning so much, and not everybody has, my husband or then boyfriend was not interested in this, and he's still not interested in this.
I've
He's
never
very,
dated anyone into this stuff.
oh yeah, well, he's very supportive, but he's not something I can necessarily go to say, "Oh yeah, I had this experience,"
No,
and
yeah,
and he's not going to ask about it either.
yeah.
So, I need, until I had kind of a community of people online that, I had to have a place to, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but I had to
like
put everything.
connect with people about
Yeah.
this stuff. That's
And
why I
that's what
started
the
the
blog
podcast.
was. That's what the blog was for me. Yeah.
Yes, that is one of the reasons I started this podcast. In the first episode, I'm like, I want to meet people. I want to make friends. I want to connect and talk about this stuff. And it's so much fun to talk about. Like listeners and watchers, we were saying that before the podcast. We both love to talk about this stuff, all of it, like any of it. You said there are a few things you don't like to. There's a few things I don't like to talk about as well.
Well, it's not that it's like I don't always feel comfortable talking about it if I don't have a lot of expertise or experience in it.
This stuff, can anyone really be an expert? I mean, it's almost like it's subjective.
Word. Yes.
It is subjective. It's like an artistry, it's subjective. Like I could give you a reading and you give me a reading, and we could both give Amy over there a reading. Amy, what's up? And Amy might like mine better. And then John can come up and give me a reading. I'll give John a reading. You give John a reading. John's going to like yours better, maybe because of the way you talk to John. It can happen that way. And I do believe we are all connected somehow in the energy. A lot of people call it source. I think is like spirit and source energy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do think we're all connected. Personally, one of my beliefs that hasn't really changed much. I always change my beliefs. How about you? Do you have pretty set?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, that has come up a lot in the last year or two in my podcast, because as I change and, people are always, I think my longtime listeners, or even going back to when I was blogging, are sometimes shocked to find out that I think I've gotten more skeptic as I've grown and changed. And I don't necessarily like that, because I've always talked about how I'm split down in the middle. Yeah. Pretty much 50-50. I've got this, I want it to be paranormal. I want it to be, supernatural on this one side, but then my other side is going to constantly roll his eyes and, write everything off. And
what is that other side? Is that your skeptic, or is he right?
I see. I don't know, because it's a constant fight. And that's one of the reasons why I got out of paranormal investigation, I think, is because I was burned out from fighting with myself, and trying to, because you don't want to make stuff up and you don't want to lead somebody the wrong way. And the more I have experiences, I look back at some of those early experiences and the evidence, quote, evidence that I had, and artifacts and things that I thought were paranormal then. Some of that I don't think are paranormal now, because I know more.
I got you.
The more experiences you have.
Like a simple example, maybe, or.
Oh, well, this one could start a fight, but.
Come on, man. This podcast is we're bullies.
Orbs in paranormal investigation, orbs.
Orbs, yeah.
Usually and there's some
flares. Yeah,
usually that. And orbs weren't really a thing. I mean, they were a thing, but orbs didn't come about until digital cameras. You can just, all you have to do is research a little bit about digital photography.
I've heard of them before then, like Polaroids and stuff, but sometimes.
But then, there's so many people, and I hope I don't offend anybody listening, because there are, even in my own podcast, there are spiritual people of all colors that I love. And I love all of us, but there are people that will see an orb, and even though, like, especially if you go to a place that's super dusty and like abandoned, like, of course you're going to have dust and stuff. And, people will be so certain, like, no, that's not dust. Obviously that's not dust, because I see, because, and his name is John, and he's got a blue aura in that orb. And I'm just, some of that I like. I'm nice, of course, and I like smile and nod. But inside my mind, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. So you're burning out a little bit on some of
on that kind of thing. Well, to me, it's just like when you learn and you progress, you can't go backwards. And part of that frustrates me, because it's like, I had so much fun. I had so much fun when I believed in
this. That's what I was just thinking. I was just thinking that I was a lighthearted kind of free spirit when I was in, under the paw of an abusive husband yelling at me. He was not physically abusive, but, he's always putting me down, yelling at me and stuff. And I was just happy as a clam. Didn't care. Blissful ignorance. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because, like, I've just never been around people who really support what I do, I guess you could say, especially in the psychic field. He was the only person I've ever had to argue about this podcast with. before I started it, I was a friend of mine, Omika. She was one of my first guests. Omika Keys. She said, Lisa, you should do a podcast. She says, I can talk to on the phone to you. And I hate talking on the phone. She said, I love listening to you talk. Couldn't think of anything to do one on. I have a lot of time. I had all the tech. I love audio. And I was like, oh gosh, I want to do a psychic one because I want to talk to people about psychic stuff. I didn't know anybody in Alabama at that time who did this stuff. Like one person, you know? And she's a witch, and she taught me. Maybe Akasha is her name, and she's still a really good friend of mine. And she's taught me like things that you know what I'm talking about. There's some people out there who can show you things, and you're like, oh wow, just wow. There's no words. There are no words for some of this, right? So I had a point, Patrick, and this if you've ever watched my podcast, you've seen me do this before. Blah, 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 blah,
oh, I do it too.
Well, when Missy would co-host with me, she'd bring it back around for me, and I can't get it back. She's gone. Can't get it back. What were we talking about?
We were talking about not going back and being happy with being kind of disappointed about losing.
Yes, that innocence.
Yes,
well, it's an innocence. It's not so much. I mean, I feel more like an innocence in me now that I've embraced the energy. But before I didn't feel that way so much. I think like I'm really thinking about that struggle you're going through where it's almost like irritating sometimes to hear people like kind of make up stuff. Is that kind of what you're saying? When they really believe it is what you're feeling, right?
Yeah.
Like I do see some people kind of do that with signs for past loved ones. And, you know, they really want to see a sign so bad. And there's a dual side to that too. You know, some people who don't want to see a sign or don't believe in signs will have freaking signs. Everyone else will even see the signs. Like you know, a whole herd of blue jays just comes in, you know, and sits on them. You know, like 80 of them sit on a building. That's not going to happen. You know, something like that, and the person will just be like, no, it's not. It's not it. It's not a sign. You know?
Well, I guess for me too, it's not necessarily that I get irritated that someone believes something. It's when they're so confident that, you know, they're smarter because they know.
Oh, like a better than kind of thing, like a measuring stick.
Yeah. And if you think about,
weird, yeah.
I don't know how many of your listeners follow more of the paranormal investigation world.
I don't know anything about the listeners.
But they, a lot of people with EVP, for example, because that's one of the biggest things that has always fascinated with me. And I've done a lot of, especially 15 years ago, I did a lot of EVP experimenting.
Can you tell the listeners what EVP is, just in case they don't know?
EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, spirit voices caught in recordings or in the old days on tape. And it really became a thing for sure in the, I think, late 50s and in the 60s. Yeah. And then, of course, with the popularity of ghost hunters and paranormal shows and things like that, it's exploded even more. But I can't tell you how many hours and hours and hours and hours, both from when I did paranormal investigation, I, for the most part, only did it when somebody needed help. You know, nowadays paranormal investigation is kind of like little bowling team, and it's kind of a social outing, and everybody just goes.
I would love to do it, but and
that is fun. That is fun. But when I first started, which, you know, 15 years ago is a little bit different, but when I first started, I wanted to help people. And so, you know, I would go in, you know, a legit person had a concern or whatever. So, you know, I would sometimes spend a month or more going over that evidence and audio. And then I've also done my own little personal EVP experiences in my own house where for every day for weeks, I would do little small, you know, seances you could call. And, you know, the majority of the time, it's nothing, or it can be explained. You know, there are ways to use two recorders or use a video recorder at the same time so that when you think you hear something, you think you heard a voice, a couple of times or many times I've proved, oh, that's when I scratched my hand across the table.
Yeah, I went through a whole like
oh my
10 years doing that.
gosh.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's my dog that's under the desk and he snored, but it sounded like, go to hell. And so
you just have a big imagination.
but then there will be people that have way, 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 way less experience or teams that will say, oh yeah, we did this investigation this last weekend and we now have, 750 EVP examples on our website. And I'm like, you do not have 750. When you're out in the wild and you're with 10 other people and there's wildlife and I'm like, do you really have that? But then I also feel horrible, like a horrible person for judging them. So I've had to,
that sucks.
part of my growth,
I say so. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, for real. Part of my growth has been getting over myself and just learning to just smile and let people have their experiences because they're going through growth too, but really my struggle is with myself, because I get frustrated with myself for trying to work so hard to prove that something's not paranormal when the other side of me really wants it to be paranormal, because I really do believe I have 100% belief that there's life after death. That's what
you're a psychic medium. Do you consider yourself a psychic?
No, not at all.
Interesting.
Not at all. But I know, I feel like I have enough experiences and I have my, I grew up Southern Baptist and grew up working even in college.
State? Southern. I'm
Missouri.
Missouri. Okay. I'm right.
Missouri.
I grew up right next door, mostly in Alabama.
But I also worked in several churches. And so, I've since college, I've kind of been running away, and I'm gay and have been running away from,
I understand that.
from the dogma of religion and stuff. And so one of the first things that I got out of this spiritual shift was my fear of death. Like, I don't fear death anymore because that is the one thing that I'm absolutely, I'd say 99.9% confident about is I know that, I'm not going to be either in a fiery hell. And I really don't think that I'm just going to lights out and nothing happens.
That just doesn't make sense.
That I don't have issues with in my mind. It's what people consider as evidence, and it's what people consider as this is spirit contact or this is that. And it bugs me because I'm like, why do I have the need to do that?
maybe it's part of it is because you're here to bust some frauds. Maybe you're around to do that. And it's not a bad thing that you think that way. You're supposed to think that way, maybe.
I also don't think I'm the personality that would do that, though, because I don't know where it would play in. I get it, though. Yeah, I get it.
I don't know your life exactly, but I feel like that's it's a good, healthy skepticism. But, I feel like maybe if I want to give you advice, because, our sponsor, the place I work, Everclear, it's an advice app. I give advice for a living. Yeah. I don't like giving advice unless I'm asked. So I literally am asked to give advice every single time someone calls. It's my job.
There you go. That sounds fun.
It is a great company. It's just the best. Everclear is just the best. And I've interviewed a lot of the readers from the platform and stuff. Yeah. So I've talked to lots of psychics and psychic mediums, and most of the ones I've talked to have been really laid back. And I don't talk to. I think that's Tony Stockwell was on the podcast. I think he's a really well known.
I know that name. Yeah.
In England and over in the States, he's picking up a lot of popularity. That's the only, I didn't know it until I read about him, but that's the only, maybe I have had psychics on the podcast who are famous and don't even know it because I never followed it before. I've just never kept up with the psychic news of people because I just do my own thing. And when they come on the podcast, I'll remember them, but and if I see them somewhere else, I'm like, I know that person. But I haven't really I don't know, the big glamorous psychic thing is kind of gone now. We always had in our culture in America, especially, I feel like we always had a TV show or a radio show or a writer. There was always some psychic star and Alison Dubois was ours for a while. And then we had Sylvia Brown was from here. And then like we got James Von Prague in England. He's like, he's like the figure for, you know what I mean? We don't really have one in the States right now.
I feel
I
like we
guess,
have Tyler Henry. Tyler Henry, I
he was
think.
on our, no, he wasn't on our show. I don't think, or was he? I think he might have been.
If he was, I'm incredibly jealous because I've tried getting
I don't
Tyler
know.
Henry
I
for
think I wrote him.
years.
And
Yeah.
he said, look at my stuff. I can't remember really. If I did have a podcast with him, I'll let you know. But
Okay.
I just can't remember. I think he's one of the
I
people
won't be able to
wrote.
talk to you anymore after that. If you really did interview him, I'm just gonna
no, I'm just kidding. If I did, I'll write him and say, hey man, there's this really cool guy named Patrick.
Yeah.
He has a great podcast.
I do like Tyler Henry. I haven't followed him as much in the last year or so.
Yeah.
But especially when he was younger and first doing his show, he was just this, squirrely looking kid out doing readings, and he's just fascinating to watch.
That's cool.
And just seems so believable, I guess.
Yeah.
The way he works. It's hard to imagine Tyler Henry as wanting to pull a fast one on someone.
That's so true. The most bona fide healing people. When I say from my experience, a healing person, a person who heals other people with energy, in any way, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, whatever. I feel like when they're comfortable in that position, I guess you could say, or because I feel I'm very comfortable in my position now, but I didn't used to be as a psychic reader and in the profession, and doing a podcast about it for so long. Is that I've really immersed my life in it since 2018. But before then I had for a long time. And then I got called out. Just like, don't want to do this anymore. I burned out, but it's made my life so much better. Following this path, looking into this stuff, trying to figure it out, learning about it. I've lost a lot of good friends, but they weren't good friends. That's what I found out, That's one that's really hard part of doing any kind of spiritual work for me has been putting boundaries as part of mine. I have to put boundaries up. Otherwise I'll just give and give and give until there's nothing left. I have a lot of energy. I've got a lot. I've got a lot of love. I'm like, I'm gonna throw it everywhere. But I think most of the ones I've met on the podcast who have that sincerity about and when they're on the podcast, they heal me by talking to me, and I can pick it up, through empathy. I feel all the pain goes away and all this stuff. Those people, they are never egotistical. They never have a chip on their shoulder about anything. I mean, they may have problems in their life and they may have,
sure.
Like all of us do, but they never have an attitude. I think that's what maybe bothers you, maybe a little bit, attitude. Better than attitude, and people from the South are like that. So if you're from the South and you were raised and you were gay in the South, I mean, I know how that is. It's a terrible, it's really feel out of place. I mean, you don't fit in anywhere from what I saw of people. And to come out was like a huge, huge thing in the South, back in, I'm 49. I don't know how old you are, but
I'm almost 47.
Okay, so we're about the same age group. So Generation X, like in the South, you just did. I had so many friends who came out in college and afterwards. Like they would be like 25 coming out. I mean, it took a long time for some of these people from Alabama to be able to let themselves live the way they really were built.
Yeah.
Because it's hard in the South to express who you are. So I'm wondering if some of that skepticism comes from, that better than thing in the South. You know what I'm talking about? The better than thing. A lot of people in the South kind of have this, I'm better than you attitude. And if you think you're better than me, then I'm going to watch. You better watch out. Those people with that attitude. I don't know. I think not everybody just like,
no, but I think that way. I don't know. I think it's more of a Midwest thing here. And also, I grew up on the Kansas City side of Missouri. I'm now on the St. Louis side. So but I grew up on the Kansas City side, which is a little more liberal and a little more open to it was a really good place for, at least in the Midwest, for a young person coming out to be around. So I actually had a really lucky and smooth experience growing up. But, when you grow up in the church and work in the church, especially Baptist, you do get a lot of dogma kind of pounded in you.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't experience a lot of, physical pain, physical hurt from that, and I didn't have, I had a lot of people in church that look after me, and I'm still friends with a lot of those people and a lot of the,
Oh, that's so great.
adults in, churches that I worked in or grew up in are really good people. But the messages that the dogma that's just taught to you from as a child, it's a rewiring when and the
Absolutely is.
moment I could, like, there's probably like a month's time around 2008 where it's just something like, well, and even when I was in college and working in churches, I told myself, because I was already out and everything and, had my own life in college. And I told myself, this is just a job. And, I'm a music person, I'm a musician. And so
Were
I was
you
like,
running sound? Don't tell me you ran
no,
sound.
no, I'm music education and vocal music and all of that.
Beautiful. Okay.
So I was like, I'm doing this for the music because that's what I've gotten out of church my whole life is music. So I'm
Me too.
doing this for the work and for the music, and everything else goes in one ear and out the other. So I did that for a couple of years, but then in adulthood, around 2008 when I started that spiritual shift, there's like a month time period where it was just like something clicked, and it was like, oh, I don't need that shit. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I cuss on here?
Oh yeah, shit yeah.
I don't need that stuff. I don't need it. And it's not true, or it doesn't
Yeah.
resonate with me. And it was just gone. And that's when, like, I started I was probably healthier for that, when you
Yeah.
lose that internal stress and
Judge.
judgment
Where's that
and
judge from? That judging
yeah,
in your head from
yeah. So
religion.
I don't worry about that stuff anymore. Now
Good.
I do get aggravated when I see, people teaching hate or
I do too. I
and
don't
all
like
of that
that.
stuff. But
I
at
don't like
least
that
for
either.
me, I've purged that.
Yeah.
I don't worry. I worry about dying in pain.
That's
I
what I
worry
worry
about
about.
that
I
a
would going
lot.
back to that. That is, I have lost my fear of death, but I still worry about hurting
Yes.
until I had a treatment. I had like a medical treatment. I don't want to talk about it, but it really helped me get over my fear of death. And I had this. Well, I have had an NDE, and I was
Oh
in a
wow.
lot of pain. And I saw all my guides and my main guide and a bunch of people who told me they were my ancestors, and all these people and my cousin, all these spirits were around me. And then my friend who had passed away walked up, and then what was going on was I had pancreatitis, and I don't know
Mm,
what was happening at that time, but my best guess is a piece of my pancreas was trying to go through a bile duct, and it wouldn't go through, and it
mm.
finally went through. So when it got through, all the pain went away and everything just stopped. But I thought I was about to die. I mean, I did, because all the people came, and I couldn't breathe, and I was just in a ball, and looking at them, and I wasn't. I was like this, but I could see them. I had my astral body out of my body, looking up at them.
See, that's the kind of stuff I get jealous of. Not the painful part of it, but
Yeah.
the NDE part of it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get jealous of those
Well, it's
experiences.
really
Those are the
weird because
experiences I'm always looking for.
well, I'd already believed I was in all this stuff, but what was so shocking was that my guide, Sam, was there. That was more shocking than anything, I think, because I have a spirit guide named Sam who came to me when I was about 23 or 24. And I didn't know he was a spirit guide. I'd never heard that term. I thought he was my boyfriend, my imaginary boyfriend that I made up, and I was going to find him. And then I believed he was real. But then when I got the term spirit guide, I was like, oh,
You're like, shut up.
yes, I was like, shut up, spirit guide. He's my spirit guide. That's why he didn't like it when I'd be like, I love you, Sam. And he'd hit his energy, and my imagination even would be like, and I'm like, why is he like that? In my imagination, that's not right. How can he
That's
control
funny.
himself? So it's very
That's
confusing.
hilarious.
Yeah, and
I've never heard anybody describe their spirit guide in boyfriend terms.
oh, I loved him. I have heard other people have the same thing happen to them, oddly enough, when they didn't know what it was. They fell
Yeah.
with their spirit guide too. One other person told me that happened to her. And then when she found out it was a spirit guide, it all made sense. It does. It does all make sense all of a sudden. Like something that just wasn't clicking, it suddenly does. And this is my gander. He comes for every podcast.
Oh, hi, kitty.
The shadow cat. I have.
Very,
Well, I want to ask you. I'm really curious. Like, what is the most bombastic experience you personally have had that just was like, I can't explain this, but it's something.
oh my gosh. It's going to be a story that, my listeners have heard multiple times, but I
I
mean, it
haven't.
is the craziest experience I've had. And sorry, it is a little lengthy, but I'll try to speed it up. So there was, probably, this would be right before I started the podcast. Would be when I was blogging. So probably 2012, 2013. And I was also doing paranormal investigation with my team, which was my family, by the way. So my paranormal team was my family.
That's so.
We trusted each other, and that's the best way I feel like you can do it. You've got to trust everybody if you're going to really do that and do it well.
Yes. And
And
trust themselves.
oh yeah, well, I've also always been fascinated with all things spiritualism and seances, clearly seances and Victorian. And so I decided, and I had a medium friend at the time. We're not necessarily connected anymore, but I had a medium friend at the time, and I said, will you help me? I want to just kind of turn it into an experiment, but let's have a number of seances with some sitters and have a goal for each seance. And for the seances, for the most part, we were trying to reach out to pioneers in the paranormal spiritual kind
Like
of
Edgar
world.
Casey or something.
Yes. Like there were some, higher profile, mediums from the past or investigators or things like that. And so I did a lot of, I don't think I would do it the way I did now, but when I was just getting started, this is how I did it. And so
Right.
we did like two of those in like a week's time, and I filmed it, and we didn't have anything like major happen, but it was cool. And of course you're putting yourself in all that energy, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was also doing a lot of EVP experiments on my own at that time. And I lived in a different house, but in that house, I was doing it in my own house and taking that seriously. And I was reaching out to the Fox sisters and, thinking I was getting communication from them, and perhaps I did, and doing a lot of EVP stuff. And then also, and of course I was still teaching full time then. There was in the middle of the week, it very rarely did it happen this way, but I was contacted by a family with a legit concern, and oh my gosh, can you come out and check it out? And I say that because a lot of people, especially since the paranormal explosion of a million paranormal teams and all the paranormal TV shows and everything, a lot of people, when they call you, it's because they think it's cool, or because they want to be on TV, or they want to invite all their friends and things like that. And this was not. This was the most, quote, normal family, level-headed family. And I could tell they were just scared.
Oh.
And they also reached out to a medium. And so I kind of worked in tandem with the medium. But it was also I'm like, oh my gosh. And then you start having, I'm like, can I help them? Is this something, am I up to this? Like, should I?
Yeah, I was wonder that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, of course, and it's also a school night. And so I'm doing that, and up all night doing that. And after, so this is probably in a 2-week time period. So I'm really surrounded by all this intense energy and, paranormal energy. And, at that time I was also, and I still do, I'm looking for it all the time. Like paranormal doesn't come to me. I'm looking for it. When you're searching for it and wanting something to happen and wanting to have experiences, I was doing a lot of that in that time period. Well, my sister and her partner at the time, now wife, was staying with us that week because they had done one of these seances with me. They were the sitters for one of these seances. So they were staying with me that night. And I it was in the middle of the night. Everyone was sleeping, and I'm in bed with my husband. I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know what time it was. I like to joke that, of course, it was probably 3 o'clock in the morning, the witching hour or whatever, but I don't know what time it was.
The voice.
But I woke up and I was freezing. It was cold. I was freezing and my heart was racing. And so I'm on the right side of the bed. My husband's on the left side of the bed. And I'm on my left side. So I'm looking at my husband.
Oh, looking at him. Okay.
On my left side. And my heart's racing and it's cold. And there was an added sense of fear. Like it was weird to just wake up and be afraid. Like
that is weird,
why would you wake up in the middle of the night and all of a sudden be afraid?
Just wake up, nothing happened.
But my brain started kicking in gear. Of course, the skeptic side of me. And I'm like, oh, wait, is this the thing? Like, isn't there some wives' tale that men aren't supposed to sleep on their left side because it was bad for the heart or whatever? And
you
I'm
get
like,
yourself all psyched.
Yeah. So I'm like, am I getting ready to have a heart attack, or is my arm asleep? Is that why? And I'm like, no, nothing's asleep. It's just a racing heart and things were cold. And I did have that sense of like something's here with me, which I don't experience. I don't have these experiences, Lisa.
Right.
So even as I tell it, I'm just imagining everybody judging me, going, "Oh my gosh, she's a wacko."
No one's judging you. Not on this podcast. If they do, I'll kick their little asses.
Well, and even if they do, I'll still like them
if I could.
And so what I started doing is I started thinking, okay, everything I've read says white light. You're imagine white light, put yourself in some white light. So I'm lying on my side, freaking out, going white light, trying to make it go away, right? Because I didn't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how much time passed, but I was imagining the white light, heart still racing. It was cold. And I swear to God, Lisa, a hand came over the right side of the bed. I'm on the right side of the bed, right? So I'm facing my husband, and a hand came over the other side of me, grabbed my shoulder, and pulled me back. So now
you're flat.
So now I'm flat on my back. Now it was really quick, and my instinct was to grab for the hand.
Right.
So I did grab the hand. It was a cold hand.
I bet it was.
Intuitively, I saw a cold black hand, like a dead looking black hand. I didn't really see it, but that's kind of like, I guess, my mind's eye imagining that. And it retreated. Now, this happened very, very, very quickly, but a hand grabbed me, pulled me back.
Holy cow.
I grabbed it and it retreated back under the bed, right? And
so
that's
terrifying.
All of a sudden, I'm flat on my back and I'm like, holy shit. Right? Like, what just happened? I look over at my husband. My husband,
wake up.
Sleeping quietly. No idea that anything's going on. And, I wouldn't have probably wanted him to know at the time anyway, because he, like you said, he would have kind of rolled his eyes at it. But so I was like, I'm definitely not getting out of bed because I'm not putting my feet on the floor right over there. But I've always prided myself that I'm not really afraid of ghosts. I've never really been afraid of ghosts. I'm afraid of people. I'm not really afraid of ghosts. And I've even been in abandoned houses by myself, in the dark. It's not the most pleasant thing in the world, but I'm like, if I can do that, why am I afraid of this? But I was, so I didn't get out of bed. And I got the only thing I could think of, and this was like, early, like some of the first iPhones, right? So I got my iPhone at the time. I went to the recorder app, opened it up, and I hit record, and I stuck the phone up in the air, and I was just like, if you're there, are you trying to reach out to me? Like, do you have something to tell me? And I just hold the phone up, ready for it to record, and I let it record for a little bit. And of course, I'm whispering because my sister and her wife are sleeping in the bedroom next door, and I didn't want to wake them up and cause a commotion. So I pressed stop, and I didn't listen to it because I didn't want to wake anybody up, but I put the phone down. And I remember lying there forever trying to go back to sleep, trying to get comfortable enough to go back to sleep. But at the same time, I'm like, shut up. That was so cool.
I would not stay in that bed. I'd be out of that room.
Oh,
man.
But you know, as scary as it was, that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. I've looked for my whole life, you know, so I'll never say I wish it didn't happen because I loved it. I had always up to that point.
How
old
were you? 2008, you said? Like,
no, this would have been around 2012.
Oh, okay.
So, gosh, I can't math. I was in my 30s.
Okay.
You know, or early 30s. And, but up until that point, I had always kind of poo-pooed that whole, you know, hitchhiker thing. Like people can, you know, follow you and attach to you. And, you know, paranormal investigators are always supposed to be careful and, you know, sage yourself or meditate and not. And I'm always like,
you didn't like that. That's too woo-woo for you.
Not a thing. But now I wonder, you know, I think it probably could have been a thing. Now, people will they always ask me if I think it was evil or negative, and I'm not a big like evil or like demonic kind of, I don't have a belief.
The energy to me sounds like a spirit wanting to go on.
Like, well, that's the thing. I think too many investigators immediately jump to, oh, well, that was a demon. Oh, that was dark energy. Oh, that was, you know, people, they talk about shadow.
Most of them just want help. From what
ghost hunters always talk about, oh, it's a shadow figure. Do you see that? Oh, it's a shadow figure. So they're bad. And I'm like, how do you know that isn't Aunt Bertha?
Yeah. Like I said,
trying to muster up whatever energy she can.
Right.
And that's how she did it. So I kind of have the belief that you do. I don't necessarily, I mean, it definitely wasn't a good feeling, but you know, I think it
doesn't feel like she was it feels like a she to me, but it doesn't feel like it was desperate, whatever it was. Desperate to get
I can feel that. Yes.
Yeah. Like,
so
get me out of here.
Yeah. And so part of me also feels bad for being startled because I'm like, oh God, if that was, you know,
feel guilty for startling the ghost you scared.
Right. Because it
startled you back.
The crap out of me, but I did.
It's crazy.
I did hold my phone up. I did hold my phone up.
What did it say? Oh, did you listen to it the next day?
I listened to it the next day. And so after I woke up and, you know, and I'm in a different place, my mind is going, okay, was I for real? Did I imagine that? You know, I do think I really do believe in that whole hypnagogic state where you're half asleep, half awake. And
there's something weird going there. Yeah.
You know, you got dreams that you remember at that point in time, or people see things at that point in time. So, you know, part of me wonders if I was having some weirdo experience being half awake or half asleep, but I did have a recording. So I'm like, see, I had a recording. I didn't imagine holding my phone up, but there wasn't anything there that I heard. It was just
still silence. Have that audio by any chance?
Probably not. Probably not.
Yeah, with all the stuff we have now, you might be able to really open it up and hear something maybe.
And I would have tried that. I would have tried because I did so much EVP stuff then. I manipulated audio all the time trying to.
Did she ever, or that thing ever happen again? Or any?
No, I remember a couple of nights later, I remember waking up with the same similar feeling and thinking, oh shit. Really? Is this going to happen again? And I remember looking up and seeing the dog that we had at the time sitting in the doorway of our bedroom looking out. And I remember thinking, why the hell would my dog?
That's when I
sitting in the doorway.
My cats were acting away. I'm like,
yeah. But that was it. It was one other, and nothing happened again. It was just I woke up with that same similar feeling and I could tell, and that was it.
Yeah.
So that's the crazy. I've had a lot of little
really
things.
Crazy story, man. No wonder. Just no wonder you got into investigating this stuff, because that if I hadn't had the spiritual experiences I've had and had them explained to me, or if found explanations for them in a metaphysical or spiritual sense, I would love to be a spiritual investigator or something like that. If I hadn't gone the direction I took with actually learning the skills, I think I would have loved to have been a paranormal investigator to prove stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, I mostly do it
find out
some fun now. You know, we're not active as like a paranormal team, to go help people. But I will, if someone who I know or a family friend or, an old colleague calls and has an issue, yeah, I go out and I have, I still have the gadgets and the tools and, I, even if it's just to go and sit in a space quietly and just listen and try to reach out and try to get activity and, even if nothing happens and you're just sitting in the dark for hours, just the thought of possibly connecting with something and communicating with something can sometimes get me to tears. It's that connecting with whatever might be there is that I really, but I have very, very little to show for it as far as quote evidence.
I don't know. Maybe you might be one of those types of people. Like I talked about this on this podcast a lot. Telepaths don't know they are usually. They will not say they are, and they will not say there is much activity of psychic skills going on. Telepaths, from my point of view, can usually tell basically what someone's thinking about. Generally, not word for word, I wouldn't say, but they can walk into a restaurant and look around, and they pretty much know what everybody's thinking about, what's on their mind. What they're about. And it's not about observing, it's just like a quick scan. And I don't think, you can be that like a mentalist but not everybody, not as many people as I've seen do that. And they're not smart, I'm just saying, it's like they're not geniuses, they're just people. And they just go, and they know everything. I'll say, I've done this with people before when I'm talking about the podcast or psychic stuff. I'll be like, okay, if I see it happen, I'll be like, did you do this? What's wrong with that person? What's happening with that person? What's happening? And they can tell me what they think. And they have reasons, but they didn't have that reason when they first walked in. That person's back hurts. Well, you can see that the way they're leaning. I'm like, they weren't leaning that way earlier when you told me their back hurt. Later on in the back to it, the person, stuff like that,
Yeah.
So you might have experiences like that and you're just so used to it, you don't know any different. That's what I'm guessing with you, because you totally have that telepathy thing. You can tell if you're being judged is what it feels like.
Oh, yeah. And
I
think
horrible thing to have to feel because they're wrong almost every time, right? They don't know what they're thinking. They don't know what they're thinking about. They're thinking wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I've never felt, sometimes I wonder if, I can definitely get myself to think of ways that I'm empathic, maybe.
Definitely.
But otherwise, the only thing I ever really feel intuitively and the things I experience in the paranormal world are mostly hearing. I've always
I don't hear
when I meditate or when I, ask for my loved ones to reach out to me. I always tell them, I said, okay, the best way I experience things is through hearing, so I used to record a lot more things than I do now. It's been a long time since I've really, tried to gather evidence or anything, but I have Mr. Magoo old people eyes, so it's not going to be seeing, if I
have terrible eyes, but I see in
really?
Mostly it's visual.
Well, people talk about having, night visitors or, what do they call it? If like your loved one visits you in the middle of the night.
Good see a visitation, yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm like, girlfriend, don't try to do that because first of all, between my glasses being off and I can't see my hand in front of my face and then having my CPAP strapped to my face going, if you're trying to reach out to me in the middle of the night, you better hang it up. Like it's not going to be vision.
Yeah, listen up, angels and guys.
Right,
I do. Work at night.
I do. I've told them. I'm like, I'm dead to the world. Not you're kind of dead, but I'm dead to the world, and so it's going to have to be audio or come to my dreams. It's not going to happen with my Magoo eyes.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. I don't know. I've always wanted to hear. I'll hear. Everyone. I think anyone I've ever asked my entire life. Have you ever heard your mom calling your name when she's not home? That happened to you a lot when you were a kid.
I've had those. Yeah, those are some of the things that I've experienced. Weirdo things like that.
Everybody's had that happen. They hear mom and she's not home. They're calling.
Yeah. Mhm.
Lisa. And we're so used to it, we just kind of shrug it off and don't think about it. What is that?
Mhm.
Because that's the only time I hear things, is if something like that. I hear music sometimes, but
I had an experience where I was at school one day and a young man that was in one of my classes had just lost his mom. And I don't remember how recent he lost his mom, but I remember talking to the kid about it. And I didn't know the kid all that well, but I remember being really touched that day and feeling really bad, but just feeling for this kid, And as someone who still has his parents, I'm just like, oh, can't
you really
imagine.
felt with that.
And I drove home that day and I'm listening to the radio, and I swear a voice came through the radio, through the, over the top of the, music or the
Yeah.
chatter and the singing. I
Yeah.
heard a voice, and I forget what the voice said now. I think I might have blogged about it at the time. I'm going to have to look for that.
If you
But there
do,
was
send it
some
to me. I'll
kind
put
of
it in the description.
voice that was not part of it,
Yeah.
And intuitively I told myself, I think maybe that was that kid's mom reaching out to me, and knowing that this was my thing. Sometimes I'm like, if I just even talking to a stranger and, talking to them about their experiences, and, that loved one from the other side knows that I'm this kind of nerd, of course, maybe they might come try to reach out to me or get some message across or something.
Yeah, of course.
But it's never super clear. It's never like, hi, can you tell my son that I'm,
No,
I love, it's never that.
No, it's
Never.
not. Everyone wants it to be that clear, though. The people who ask for readings and medium, not always. I mean, I get pretty clear messages, but I get them from my guides and the spirits. But my guides help me a lot with spirits, because I communicate with them better than any. Well, I communicate with my guides kind of better than most humans. Yeah, I don't feel like I fit in on this planet. I'm one of those. I don't think I'm a starseed or anything, but I just don't fit in many. And maybe it's just because I've mostly lived in the South and I lived in Phoenix for a while. But, oh my gosh, Patrick Keller. Can you believe we have talked for over an hour already, at least according to the timer? I feel like I just
go ahead and do a
3-hour.
Let's do a 3-hour show. Come on.
I mean, I think we could. Can you come back? Can you please come back?
Absolutely.
I've really enjoyed this. This is so awesome. And I just love everything you're saying is so interesting. We have had very few skeptics, and you have a healthy skepticism. I love it.
I hope people don't.
It's really great. I love it.
I can think back to a time when I got upset when I heard people who are, and I would never, just consider myself a skeptic, capital S skeptic, but I hope I never offend anyone by, expressing, my more skeptic side, but just if
you don't have skepticism, you're going to fall off the flat earth.
But people should know I have the complete other side part of me too. Like I want everything. Oh, I just shook my camera. That was
really cool. Yeah.
I want everything to be paranormal.
Yeah.
It's just, I fight with myself. So I've got that part of me too.
I still do, man. Everything when I'm predicting for people and they're paying me, I can't really do much for myself, like predict stuff for myself, but other people they're paying me, especially, I just like, I feel, what if I'm just not, I'm just so bad at this. And of course, sometimes I'm wrong, but I have had really great clients a lot, they'll understand that he didn't call last night or something, but, I mean, there've been huge, I don't see a lot of the bad stuff, like the really, it just doesn't, it's not what appears to me or comes to me first. But a lot of intuitive people that work with the energy say that's what comes to them first is the bad stuff. So that's kind of interesting too, the scary stuff for that person or whatnot, or spirit. Oh my gosh, I could just keep talking to you. You're so easy. Where can the listeners find you?
They can go to bigseance.com. And of course, the Big Seance podcast can be found on any of the podcasting apps and on YouTube, and
he is very funny, guys, and you can tell, I'm sure, but his podcast is freaking hysterical.
I'm just a giant nerd.
You're great. I'm a nerd
all
too.
It is.
I'm a giant nerd. I'm just big nerdy nerd. Some geek in there,
Oh yeah.
Must
Oh, yeah.
admit, a
But
little
I
bit of
had
dork.
so much fun chatting with you and, and connecting with a new, nerd in my
Hey, it's
life.
great to
So,
meet a new nerd. Yes,
yeah.
we are all nerds. I don't think so. I don't think so. We can't say we're all nerds. That's something you just kind of born that way.
You could you could do a spin-off podcast.
We're all nerds.
We're all nerds.
We're all nerdy. I love it. That sounds fun. Let's do it. All the free time.
Yes.
Yeah, or whatever. Okay, thank you. So everybody go check him out. I'll put in the description a link to his website, and you can find his podcast, like he said, anywhere. And I want to thank our sponsor, Everclear. Everclear is an advice app and website where you can get advice from psychics, and I'm looking for it.
Gotta
And
get your bottle.
get the clarity you need
man.
to create the life you deserve at everclear.com. They gave this to me. They said this to me. My favorite. I love this thing so much. He saw it. He's like, "Oh, that's pretty." I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's fancy. Everclear is great." And it's a website, everclear.com, and it's an application. You can go to Apple Store or the Mac Store. Google Play Store and get Everclear Advice app is what they go under on the stores. So, and I'm on there under the name Lisa P or Lisa Russick. We're changing my name over right now. It'll be there one or the other soon. I'm an advisor there. And lastly, Mr. Patrick, I have to ask for some advice. How about advice for somebody listening to this podcast who is listening to it for the reason of like wanting to know what to look for, wanting to know like they are like a healthy skeptic, and they're listening to this to see if there's anything that really makes them believe in something they haven't believed before, never thought of before, especially, about themselves, about anything. And they really are trying to explore themselves more than anything than the mysteries. What kind of advice would you give that listener to stop fighting themselves, maybe about skepticism and just letting it flow, not knowing for sure?
I don't know what I did to make myself get better at pulling back and just kind of letting that kind of come in the space and out and not doing that. But all I can say, I guess, is, of course, I haven't always been a reader, but once I started reading, I became obsessed with it. I would just always be, for sure, look for a couple of books, not necessarily the newest books. Go back in time, look for some experts or some, mediums you trust. Or, well, I guess most of mine would be like more in the paranormal world, but I can get back to you. I can send you something.
Podcast? That sounds
sure. Good. So I find a couple of books, find a couple of podcasts. Yeah. And devote some time, I guess, either daily or each week, to just sit with yourself and process your thoughts and listen a bit, read a bit, maybe watch a paranormal show, or because you got to get some nerdiness, keep some nerdiness in your life there too.
Those are true. Yeah.
I do think the more you learn, the more you're comfortable, sitting with yourself, and maybe you won't fight with yourself as much if you're like me.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Sitting with yourself, if you make time for it. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you can even set that time aside to argue with yourself. Some people say to do that for different things, not arguing with yourself necessarily, but that's really good advice. Thank you for that. And my nose is itching. I'm sorry. I don't know what the allergies in Tennessee's new to me. I'm
I'll
here
still like you
6 months and I'm still itchy.
Oh, allergies here too. Yep.
It's cool. Yeah, it's weird weather, man.
My ears have been popping.
I have just had so much fun with you, and I really do hope you will come back. And listeners,
absolutely,
don't you love him? If you've probably seen and heard him, but he was just lovely. I just love you to death, and I do hope you come back. And I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to you and the listeners and the watchers if you're watching. And we love you. You love the listeners, Patrick. You love them.
Oh, I love the listeners.
And the watchers too.
Yeah, and the watchers too.
We love you. We both love you. Mwah. And everybody have a wonderful time wherever you may be. And be dorky. Be nerdy. be
Yep.
geeky, and be psychic. Peace out.
Bye.